Good morning, everybody.
Here.
Oh, it is, it's so there's co-host. Yeah. Thanks.
Jen is the giant floating head in the room. Are we still waiting for other folks to join?
I saw Lance on his bike headed here.
I think we are still a little short, but
Yeah.
that's just a statement about me.
Oh, and then the video, so it's looking at you. So go to the video at the
Give it a
bottom.
couple more minutes, I think some more. folks
Bottom
might
left.
pour in and Lance might.
And then
jump
like
up.
the other,
So-
yeah. Yep.
Perfect.
Try to fill
And then eventually it'll point down to where the voices are coming from.
Oh,
it.
yeah, but use it as bait for bait, but then not to, in the trap, just something of,
Because they try to take it out.
yeah.
There we go. Now the camera's.
See, our issue is not getting them to bite. It was, the traps weren't big enough. Even the, the ones like this big.
Nail them to the floor.
Yeah, oh yeah, no.
We need to record. Okay, this is a meeting of the SSR group. Lee and I are both arriving a little late because we got the time backwards, but we're here. And we have folks on the Zoom, we have folks in the room. Today is the 27th of July, and it is about 9:08. I thought I was so early, but instead, Lee, we're a little behind schedule.
I do apologize.
It's okay. Everyone else was on time and gets a gold star. I believe our consultants have proposals for us, and there is Jen Gardner on the Zoom. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning.
I just wanted to have one bit of housekeeping. Since Jen is not in the room and we have a lot of attendees online, just make sure we're speaking into the mics. That was something we had some scant use last time, so pull it close and speak into it if you could.
Yeah, if you want to relax and sit back, take the microphone with you, please.
All right, let her rip, Jen.
All right. Let's see here. Share my screen. All right. I assume you can all see that by now.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So this is, excuse me, find my voice a little bit. Continuation of our conversation from 2 weeks ago, I believe. Today we'll do just a really quick recap of our last meeting, kind of where we landed on some particular decisions. And then I have 2 or 3 slides that we'd like to just walk through our methodology and how we got to where we are today. And then we'll go back and open for discussion. So, and then once we get through the density conversation, density and minimum lot size conversation, we'd like to try to get to the use standards that we were not able to get to last time. Of course, the zoning and density is of utmost importance. So if we need to spend a lot of time on that, we can. But those uses are also tied into all of this. So I think it'd be great if we could get some general direction on the density and lot sizes, and then we can move into uses. So our usual slide, just to remind everyone of the purpose of the meeting, that this is, you serve in an advisory capacity, and we'll do some straw polls to that 70% supermajority when we feel like we're ready. All right, so you'll all remember last time we talked about the multiple dwelling units on large lots, so providing an additional subordinate unit so you can do one single family or one, residential unit, primary residential unit, and two subordinate units, depending on the different lot zoning regulations. But we kind of all agreed on that. And then we did have a bit of a discussion on setbacks and looked at reducing the side yard setbacks to 10 feet. You'll hopefully remember that. And then we landed on keeping the by right density at 1 DU per 35 acres in low and medium, and only allowing that increase for workforce housing density bonus, which we'll talk about here a little bit more today. Again, today's focus looking at that density and then hoping we can get to some of the uses a little bit later in the meeting. Another quick reminder of where we've come from and where we're headed to. So we do have that joint work session in 2 days on July 29th. Staff will be presenting our packet and the report to the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners. Following that, and in that draft is the same draft you all have been reviewing, so we're not changing anything. It's the same draft, and so then we can take all the comments from you all and from that joint work session to combine into updates for hearings in September and October. All right, so some of these numbers might look a little different than last time. Some of them we have worked really hard to run some scenarios and some calculations to the best of our ability to try to calibrate these numbers. On what we talked about last time, you'll see that we've kept that minimum by right lot size on low density and medium density at 35 to correlate with that 1 dwelling unit per 35 acres. Looking at the bonuses, and we can talk a little bit more about the bonuses when we get to the density bonus conversation, but looking at maybe tearing down that minimum lot size with the bonuses. One thing I want to note on this is a conversation we kind of touched on last time is if we have the same minimum lot size as the maximum density, you're not really getting that clustering. So we may want to look at either reducing these minimum lot sizes or reducing the minimum lot sizes if they're clustering only. So that's one thing I think we want to consider when we're discussing this is how we want to incentivize clustering maybe. And then let's see here. anytime we're going, I would say below 2 acres. So when you see on that medium density, the option of going down to a 1 acre lot size, um, probably want to make sure that's on public water and sewer. And so that might be the consideration with clustering is you maybe you can get a lower lot size or a smaller lot size if you're clustering on public water. And I just wanted to remind everyone of kind of the water situation. Kay always says that really well, but the 35-acre lots are already on a domestic exempt well. So we've all talked about that a few times. When you want to reduce that lot size, anytime you do a subdivision, you need to apply for augmentation of a well to get a residential well. And that augmentation plan really defines how many units you can achieve on that property. So, the proposal goes out with, hey, I want this many units on the property, and then working through that augmentation plan is how you determine what can really land there. I've talked to a lot of counties in the past about the residential wells. There's always been concern about the subordinate units. I think when you're submitting for your augmentation plan, if you're able to say, I want, one dwelling plus a subordinate dwelling on every property, that helps them do that calculation. So I don't think it throws the ADUs out of the water. It's just another layer to consider as they're augmenting those wells. But that all said, it's kind of common practice to go no smaller than about a 2-acre parcel when you're doing well and septic, just based on the separation requirements for well and septic from the residents and from each other. So I just wanted to throw those kind of ideas out there as we're looking at these minimum lot sizes. Anything under 2 acres, I would encourage that we need to make sure that those are on some other public water or sewer system or community water and sewer system. All right. I'm going to move over to the density and just give a little background on how we landed where we are. And then we can open for discussion on both of these items. So as you'll see here, we've kept the proposed by right density for low density and medium at 1 DU per 35 acres and increased the high density by right to 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres. Then we've gone into these 2 tiers. Now, Robin and I looked quite a bit at the 2 tiers. Is that break the right break? So the first tier would be 37 to 50% deed restricted, and you'll remember that up to 33%, 1 in 3 units is already required to be deed restricted. So we were looking at a number that falls, higher than that for that first tier. And then the second tier does still land at 51%. We ran some numbers trying to see if it would incentivize it, or give a greater incentive to move that to 80%, kind of played up and down with that number. And really the sweet spot is landing around that 51%. So it didn't make a huge numerical difference when we bumped that up further. We ran some numbers based on the median sale price in the area. And this was just kind of us running some rough numbers to see where does it sort of become an incentive to a developer. And those developers in the room can certainly weigh in on this when we get into discussion, if you have other thoughts or have kind of thought through this in the past. But so assuming kind of playing on that low end, so looking at the 37% threshold and then that 51% threshold, obviously you can provide more. But we were trying to find that point at which it starts to make sense on the revenue side of a private developer. And we did not include full construction costs or infrastructure costs, but we did consider with all of the land that we were looking at that you're not going to be, if you have a 35-acre lot, there's going to be roads taken out, open space taken out. So you're down to more of a net lot size of, 60% of that lot is actually what would be developable. So we were kind of running through those assumptions. And this is where things really landed. And also taking in consideration our conversations from 2 weeks ago. So I realized that the high density, the high bonus is still 20 DUs per acre, which may seem is a little bit lower than that maximum density with a PUD. I think it feels right from our perspective, running all the numbers and thinking about a property that's not developed at like a huge high density. You still could get that density with a PUD. Our other thought process on this was that tier 1 bonus on the low density and medium density does match up with the PUD. So we've all talked about trying to remove our reliance on PUDs. That's one area that I think if we align that tier 1 bonus with that PUD, which was what we were trying to do with the buy right, now that we've moved a little bit away from that, I think it still allows that opportunity for developing at that density without going through the lengthy PUD process. So take there to consider. The only other thing I just wanted to say before we get into discussion, I think Lance said it really well last time, is this is incremental. So we're really trying to make some sort of incremental change that would really just open the door to opportunity without opening it too wide, right? So you're not getting dwelling or density or development that's not right sized to San Miguel County. So we're trying to right size this, but still get some of that affordability in there. Certainly as you move down the road and continue to adjust the deed restriction requirements, which as we all know now are based on the location, so the workforce, where the people are located, not so much the financial constraints. As you start to tweak that down the road, you may have to come back and revisit this and say, okay, now that we are, maybe providing a deed restriction at a couple different AMI levels, do these densities still work out for us? But I think this is a really great step in the right direction for all the components that are in place at the moment. So, and I will also say, just kind of anecdotally, every time Robin and I run these numbers, we kind of keep landing in the same spot. And we're like, what are we missing? So if you guys feel like there's something we're missing, please let's talk about it today. But it's like we keep pushing it up, and then it's like it kind of pulls back, and we try to pull back, and it just kind of pushes up. So I feel like we're kind of in the sweet spot at the moment with these numbers. So with that, one other quick idea. We've talked a lot about Jackson. We talked about what other communities are doing. We did look into other communities. Jackson, since you guys have all asked, we just wanted to put forward a little bit more information on kind of how they're getting where they are. Theirs, as we said before, is based on floor area rather than units, which makes a little bit of a difference. So the incentive is like you have a box and you can fill that box. It doesn't really, it's not so much dependent on dwelling unit per acre. And as we said before, they get a ton of public financing to help out. So it's kind of hard to compare ourselves to Jackson, but just to give you guys a little bit more on how they got to where they are. So I am going to back up to the minimum lot size slide and let the conversation unfold. So are there any specific thoughts on, do we like this direction? Do we want to provide an additional incentive to cluster, which would allow a smaller lot size for the density bonus tiers? And we don't have to really talk about those specific numbers, but we can, if that's something that you're interested in, we can look into.
All right, gang. Did Jen and Robin do the math right? Let's start there. We'll get to the clustering question next and see if we can come to a agreement. Is this what we hope to see? It's very quiet. Everyone's thinking.
Digesting.
That's fine. There's some to digest here. In my digestive process, I'm taking the bottom Wrights Mesa Town residential line and feeling pretty good about it. So I'm not trying to chew on that one too hard. Dan.
So last time we talked about the use by right, and it looks like obviously you're changing the use by right for the high density. I mean, what, I thought, at least our discussion was that would probably only come into effect if we're adding deed restricted. It doesn't look like that's what you're proposing, so what changed?
Jen, that's a question for you.
That's a great question. I think we kind of stuck a pin in the high density. So if we do want to keep the by right at 35, and that was the consensus, I think we'll just make that decision right now.
I mean, personally, I'd rather see that. I get that we're trying to move away from PUDs, but on the same side, I think in my opinion, we should only be providing incentives or like a use by right if there's deed restricted, and then you move away from that PUD. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah. I'm going to agree with Danny and double down a little bit on the overriding philosophies. And that is, I'm struggling with any tiers at all. So in the case of a 37 to 50% tier, we're still encouraging free market housing. And again, with time since last week, again, this is a double down, but it's with some thought. I just really don't believe that we should be encouraging the free market as subsidies for the affordable when we acknowledge that the only way these work economically are PPPs or the governmental entities. So why are we bothering with something that could hurt us when we acknowledge that the process by which we're going to actually build housing is one that doesn't need it? So, you know, in a start with the compromise as opposed to the hard line. Let me start with the hard line position. Get rid of the tiers and just have 100% deed restricted, you get the bonus. And it's that simple. And, you know, if we're going to compromise, get rid of the 37 to 50, basically 51, or let's raise it to 65 or 80 or 90, you know, some number that we can tolerate that supports the overriding philosophy that we're not encouraging free market housing. Now, again, from a developer's perspective, I'm going to put my hat on is, does it really subsidize housing in San Miguel County? I will argue, maybe not convincingly because there's no data to support it, that it doesn't work, that the economics actually don't work. Subsidized, deed restricted properties in a town setting where there's density already, the free market values hold their value. You can have an affordable unit next to a very high-end house. Town is a great example of that. It's all over. I can't think in a million years of a property in San Miguel County where if you put deed restricted properties next to what you think is free market to subsidize it, it's going to be an upside down performance. It's just not what people are not going to buy a house in San Miguel County free market next to a cluster of deed restricted. It's not meant to be racist, socialist, classist, whatever the term is. It's just economics. So by that token, I just don't think that I'm supporting the notion that it's really the governmental entities or a PPP involving the governmental entities they're building. Let's do all deed restricted housing when we're building. Let's not pepper it to get one step forward, 3/4 of a step back. We gained 1/4 of a step toward the goal. That's just not, that doesn't. So I'm doubling down on this, that I think the tiers should be eliminated and 100% deed restricted. Let's give bonuses, and they can be solid bonuses.
So by that thinking, if I've got a 35-acre lot and I decide that because of that particular lot, I only need half of that, 17 acres, that allowing a mix of free market and allowing, like, clearing a path, an easy path for me to put a number of units, the density allowed, or less than that, almost the remaining 17 acres. That's not, and receiving a subsequent relief on my mitigation costs. That's not attractive enough to make it happen in the real world. if I stated that correctly.
No, let's start with the latter of what you said, the impact fees, the mitigation. I think we're still arguing about that as to whether or not there should be relief, if not incentivization for building something that has deed restricted. So let's take that one out of the equation. From a pure economic standpoint of, can I sell the free market units at a high enough value that they will help offset, if not make the development profitable? With the deed restricted, no, it's not going to work. And I'll, sorry, I'll digress because this is something that I do have data, at least in my head. The currently owned Pathfinder property by the county, I don't know if anyone's aware that I had that under contract for a year and studied it and looked at just those models. Didn't work, didn't pencil. And that was 10 years ago. Things have only gotten worse from that discrepancy of what the free market value is to the cost of construction, the cost to develop. Costs don't discern between free market and deed restricted. They're darn near the same. The only difference is finishes, unless you're a completely sleazy developer that builds garbage. And that's, we don't want that. We don't want that here.
But on a 35-acre lot, how often is the developer going to come in and do that, obviously as a spec project, versus the owner doing it? Because you're thinking about developers and I'm thinking about the owners of those lots who have different incentives, different motivations.
I'm not sure I follow that. If the owner of a big lot is building it for multiple units, that owner's just going to hold those and rent? What's the exit
Well, that's
strategy?
certainly a possibility, but I guess what I'm aiming at is that allowing free market juxtaposed with as an incentive to juxtapose with affordable or community or however workforce, whatever today's day is, whatever today's word is, for an owner who wants to build has a different metric. So think about it. He's not thinking about return other than, of course, equity.
The only owner that I know of that would do that would be a governmental entity. Again, we're back to who, what, let me ask the room. Does anybody here have ever witnessed a philanthropic developer that just develops for no reason?
Might
I mean,
try
Paul, you're as close to it as it gets.
and the
Nice.
development.
Compliment. That's a compliment. I know it's seriously. Yeah.
Nick, the development in Rico, I'm desperately trying to remember the name of the gentleman from the Mountain Village. It was a philanthropic effort with a hope for profit. I don't think that dream came true. And I think that in hindsight, it probably wouldn't get built again.
Yeah.
Then that supports.
Yeah, it supports what you're saying, yeah.
But the more important, sorry, and I'll close it. The more important pointly, I digress us on the developer's perspective. The more important overriding philosophy on taking a hard line is building free market does not get us to the finish line. It gets us a quarter of the way to, for every unit built, we get a quarter of a unit toward the finish line. That's just not a value equation in my mind.
I think there's one scenario that might have caused us to go down this route. And I agree that we should be talking about adding deed restricted units and not free market units 100%. However, we did have this discussion about what you're talking about, which is you have somebody out on the mesa that has a 35-acre parcel and they might not, for whatever reason, they're like, I would like to add a unit to help the situation. I want to put a deed restricted unit on my property and carve it out so that a local person can live there. I mean, we had that conversation and we thought that somebody might be willing to do that. Obviously, they need to get in and get out. There needs to be some incentive for that person to do that. And if we don't do something, well, would that be considered 100% deed restricted because they're adding one unit and that one unit is deed restricted? So they would be able to, they would qualify for this because the only thing they're adding is the deed restricted unit. So yeah, then I think this.
That was the
thought.
decision that we made in our previous meeting with the 1/35s, and there's a use by right for an ADU, and we added another ADU if it's deed restricted. And in my mind, that eliminated all impact fees for that parcel. Is that correct, Kay?
Maybe it depends on the size of the unit that they're building.
Okay. I think that would be the lever that we would want to codify is you do 2 units on your 35, make sure one of them at least is deed restricted and you are free from the impact fees, which we know are high. That's the one thing we can give that allows people to feel like they're being philanthropic, but also getting a little upfront off their building cost.
But that would still work if we remove the tiers, because
Yes.
there would only be a deed restricted option and you wouldn't have these tiers. But another question I have is the 7 acres and the 5 acres, well, I guess if we remove the tiers, that goes away, but does that mean that this generous individual could actually carve 5 little pieces of land and put 5 deed restricted houses, because we're saying 1 in 7 now instead of 1 in 35? Is that what that
Maybe.
means?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It depends. Wouldn't it depend on the zoning though?
Yeah.
And water and everything
If the
else.
zoning,
Yeah.
if the zoning supported it, yes. If not, it would require a rezone to
So-
support that.
So yeah, here we're talking about the low, medium and high density zones. So if they want to go at, something denser than 1 per 35, they're going to have to figure out the water. So say they figure out the water, they've got an augmentation plan approved. And it's approved that they can have, on that 35 acres, they can have 5 units. Now, then they have the choice, and this is what Jen was talking about earlier on minimum lot size. They would have the choice of, having several small units that are clustered and one big lot that's a development lot, or all small units and the big lot becomes open space for the benefit of that development. So, we'll have those options and flexibility in there.
Dan,
Really quick, so Nick, I agree with most of what you said. I personally, I would rather see the 51 plus deed restricted and get rid of the 37 to 50 personally. And the reason that I'm going back to that is really like a PPP. If you're doing a public-private partnership, you're gonna want to try and incentivize them to have some free market units within. So if we do 100% deed restricted, it's not gonna work. Yes, it would only be the government. And then that government's either gonna have to get debt, or they're gonna have to, go out and try and finance this somehow with some cash that we have on hand, which, as we know, stuff like funds. So it would probably be debt, unfortunately. So that's what I'm trying to kind of allow for, is someone that has that ability. The other kind of comment that you had is like, I do look at like Alisara, and I did work with deed restricted within Alisara, within free market, property. So you have free market and you have deed restricted. It does seem to work. Granted, those are really high. Just deed restricted. And I know that we're looking for like capping some of those prices. So.
let's go Kay, Hallie, and then Paul.
Okay. And I want everybody to remember that we have a requirement for if you're doing a subdivision or a multifamily development, you have to deed restrict 1/3 or of the lots or the units, and that doesn't go away. So that's why we started in at the 37%, was so that we started just above the minimum. So if, somebody comes and said, hey, I want to do a free market development, sure, I'll go through the PUD. But I don't want to deed restrict a whole bunch. They're still going to have to deed restrict 1/3 of them. So keep that in mind. And that becomes their mitigation, that any units that are built in there that are free market don't have to pay the fee. It's confusing, I know.
I just wanted to kind of comment that I understand exactly where Nick's coming. I think I align with Danny on the sense that you can still sell a free market house surrounded by deed restriction. It just happened in San Bernardo. I had 2 friends with homes listed for sale up there. The deed restricted one wouldn't sell at 800. The free market one sold for over $1 million. It just happened in the last year. So they are still selling. Now, is that gap enough to fund all of the deed restricted housing you're building up there? I mean, you would absolutely tell me no, that 400,000 is not going to get you over the finish line. But we do see people willing to co-house deed restricted and free market. I will say that the free market house sold to out of town owners. They're not going to live in that home full time, at least not right now. So that is the catch. And that's why this tiered system works because you still want the housing for the locals, but you need someone who can afford to help pay for it. And then I also wanted to point out that when we're looking at low density, these acreages are fairly small. I mean, I think about the HOA where I live is on Wilson Mesa, and it was a large parcel owner who went through the PUD process, subdivided and created open space and 8 to 15 acre parcels, I'm going to guess. I don't know the exact acreage, but a number of 8 to 15 acre parcels. That was through the PUD process. If they could have created 5 acre parcels and deed restricted a few of them, think of how many more parcels they could have carved out up on Wilson Mesa. That is beneficial. So having this in our back pocket for someone who's willing to deed restrict some or half of them is absolutely going to help. And there are a lot of locals who live up on Wilson Mesa. And now I'm looking at our map showing that these parcels are a lot closer to town. I think it's a great option.
Paul,
Well, this is a really good discussion, number one, because what troubles me, not troubles me, but what I'm trying to get my head around is we're really trying to game the market, right? The idea of adding these incentives is say, how is the market going to react? And whether it's an individual owner that with a 35 acre lot, or it's a developer that's buying that lot that wants to make a lot of money, how is the market? How are the economics going to work for that developer? And the problem is that it changes every day, right? Who would have thought we'd have a $3 million deed restricted house in Lawsonville? So on and so forth, all of those examples. So for me, it's worth the risk to put some incentives in there to see how the market reacts. I think it's worse to go to the other way, say, we're going to make it so restrictive that nobody's even going to consider, but put some basic incentives in there like that tier 1 and tier 2 and see if the market reacts. And if it reacts the wrong way, then you can change it. If we all of a sudden see some nefarious, propositions or whatever, then you can change it. But I think we don't have the market is gonna operate the way the market works, and we should put incentives in there and see how they work. And if they don't work or they work in a negative fashion, then we can change them. The second part of my question is, can you talk about the continuum from high density to community housing? So I'm assuming that's just jumping from high density is really designed for the market developer and providing some incentives. Community housing is 100% deed restricted. Is that the logical kind of continuum here?
So high density, once upon a time was Mountain Village, and then it incorporated. So you see that was a mixed use, has the core, but also had a lot, and all the density was distributed, and there was affordable housing within it. That's what the high density zone has been used for. Community housing starts on the opposite end and says the premise is that this is supposed to be for deed restricted housing. But if you want to start putting in some free market, here's how we'll consider it. And it allows, I think, 1 free market unit if you're at the planning commission review. And then if you go higher into a percentage of the units, 10 to 20%, depending on whether or not you're at net zero, then you can have, that amount of free market with a 2-step review. And then if you want to go over those amounts, then you're in a PUD. So that's, the idea is that free market can help pay for it. Now, it might not be as expensive for free market, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a way to help finance.
So we kind of see high density and community housing meeting at some point. But community,
yeah.
okay, but community housing is at its baseline is 100% deed restricted. That's the
Yes.
starting point.
Yes.
Okay.
Robin has your
yeah,
hand
thank
up.
you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was just gonna point out, I think one way to think about this is that tier 1 of incentives for the minimum lot size and the density roughly follows what you can do with a PUD. So it would somewhat match the development patterns that you're already seeing in the low density, medium density, high density, but make the path of least resistance choosing to restrict those units rather than going through the PUD process. And the other thing I wanted to mention too on the by right minimum lot sizes, high density could be at 35 acres still to incentivize, restricting for greater density. I think the trade-off there is that then the path of least resistance is, okay, by right, just one dwelling unit per 35 acres in an area that is, close to services, has infrastructure capacity, is kind of part of those future land use areas that are, the very few ones in the East End Master Plan that have been shown to see high density. So I would encourage caution with having that minimum lot size be so large, because it could encourage larger lot development in areas that the community has said that they want to see higher densities.
And I want to remind everybody that at 2 acres, you're going through a subdivision process. That means you're deed restricting 1/3 of your lots already. So it's not, it's already a significant contribution in that regard.
Significant, but to Nick's point, it doesn't get us where we're trying to get.
No.
And I keep circling back to what Nick, Dan, and Elaine have all voiced, and I happen to agree that it doesn't make sense for us to continue to build and fall behind simultaneously. So in my mind, the question still is, how can we incentivize enough, as Paul recommends, and I think he's right, to tip the market so that the best choice is to do deed restricted housing, even though you may not make as much. At the end of the day, it's maybe an easier path. There's a little bit of philanthropic element to it, perhaps, but really it needs to be an economic decision where it makes more sense. And I guess the public-private partnership is where the government tips the scale and makes the numbers work. And that's the only model I've seen work, honestly. If we look at this from a straight private, it's never going to work. It's always going to be easier to build one castle than it is to build small homes for working folk. So, Elaine.
I have another question about the generous guy up on the mesa
Mm.
who might want to add a deed restricted house. If we had these tiers, he hypothetically, or she could build 5 more houses on their 35 acre parcel. And if we keep these tiers, 1/3 of them could be free market.
Okay.
Okay, remember also we have the future land use map. So that map identifies where people can rezone to the low, medium, and high. And that is clustered in the east end here. So it's not on Hastings Mesa, it's not on Wilson Mesa, Iron Springs. It's not on those mesas. Those are the F zones. That's where the caretaker units come in.
Which
So
are only rentals, right? You're not going to sell off your caretaker unit.
you cannot sell off your caretaker unit.
Okay, so then we're saying that the picture that I painted the last time I spoke is not possible. The person up on Wilson Mesa, because he's in the F zone,
Mhm.
cannot actually do this.
They have to go PUD.
Also, if he or she
Right.
wants to add one deed restricted unit, they can't do it.
They would have to do the caretaker unit and they'd have to retain ownership.
That's
Or-
something I think would be great to look at, because
Or I think there's an or in there though. Or if it's a potential zone district as defined by the East End Master Plan future land use map, that owner could then rezone to one of these zone districts and then take advantage of this.
Yeah.
So that's where the East End Master Plan comes in.
But
If
none of
it's-
those are on the Mesa.
If it's in the East End Master Plan, like
Yeah.
I said, Hastings Mesa,
Yeah.
Wilson Mesa, and beyond are not in the East End Master Plan.
Right.
So
And that
then
was
this-
deliberate. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we were trying to avoid, Elaine, having people really far from where they worked and having to navigate long gravel roads to get to civilization and commute and add to our traffic problems. So we were trying to disincentivize extra development away from the employment centers.
Yeah, and given the recent mudslides and having kids in school, I can attest to the fact
Yeah.
that that is stressful. So focusing our energy on the East End right now, I think is warranted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jared, thank you.
I was just gonna mention, to Nick's point, I agree. Today, the only one doing affordable housing in this whole county are governmental units. And I don't see that changing. Right, that unless we can get the private sector into this game. And to Paul's point, if we don't put an incentive on the table, we're gonna keep getting exactly what we're getting, right? And so that is kind of the balancing act I think we've got here is I tell you, I'm gonna get fired if government stops trying to work on affordable housing. And I'll tell you, it's really tough, right? We're looking at those construction costs that are absolutely insane, right? And we're trying to figure out how to make it pencil. And even when the land is free, it doesn't happen very quickly, right? But I think what this kind of plan is laid out to try is that there might be one or two, and I agree, we're only gonna take a quarter step forward. But I still see that as a step forward. If that's one unit, I'm considering that a win. Because that is the kind of progress, frankly, we aren't making and we aren't making fast. Right, so that's the gambit here is how do we balance? How do we get private development into this game? How do we even have a chance? And we could see a market downturn and that economic picture could change, right? And if we get some deed restricted housing out of it, I would say that's better, right?
Can I ask you a question?
I have a thought on that. I think we're looking at the model a little incorrectly, but we're trying to tie it into the housing development itself. I think the only way you can get that partnership is to look at the cooperation of the different entities. The county's not creating a lot of jobs. It's the town and Mountain Village. And so those that are building hotels or expanding from a commercial standpoint on for-profit opportunities, I believe need to take a larger role. And that's where it's difficult for the county to have these lines match up. But if you look at a cooperation between the town and the Mountain Village that are creating the jobs, that are creating the housing issue, the county's not creating the housing issue. It's created by the town and Mountain Village. And the profit is being made in the town and the Mountain Village. So I think those entities, if you're gonna build a hotel or if you're gonna do some of these things that are for profit, people are making money, that needs to be tied closer to the housing situation than trying to do a standalone development. The standalone development's not gonna work. Construction costs, land, even when the land's free, it's not gonna. So I think we need to look at it in a different model than trying to make the standalone housing complex work, because from my perspective, it's not even close.
You're right, but those entities aren't in the room and we're not authorized to change their employee ratios.
I understand that, but I also don't want us to go down a path that is just not gonna work. And so if they're not in the room, then they need to be in. Because that is where I look at the change of direction. One other thought too, I had on change of setbacks. We also have to look at that from a fire perspective. Because buildings are now fuel, we're seeing in the last few years, and so when you reduce that setback, you're gonna also increase the likelihood of spread building to building. So if we do reduce the setbacks, we need to look at fire resistant materials in that situation, because it'll spread quickly. So anyway, and I know they're not in the room, but it's also up in the room to come up with a viable solution. And so I really feel like we're going down a direction it's just not.
Hallie.
Yeah, I had a question, but before I do, I wanted to kind of respond to you. I think that's an excellent point, and I think basically that's a comment to the commissioners saying politically, we need you talking to the towns and making this happen. But right here in the room today, we can look at the zoning and we can look at this. So I agree with both of you. My question was, we keep hearing that like in the room here, we're not thrilled about tier one. There seems to be more support for tier two, but tier one aligns with the PUD process and what you get from PUD. Can we change that? Like, why did they have to get that through the PUD? Can we make the PUD not give them that? Like, what does the PUD give them and where is it stated?
I think you need to keep in mind that, not all property owners want to be in the business of developing affordable housing. Some people just want to, do it for maximum profit.
Mhm.
And so what we're doing is we're keeping the PUD, for those people. And like I said, they still have to do the 1/3. Because there's going to be a subdivision or a PUD involved in it. But they're not getting the bonuses. And so what we're doing by having the tier one, tier two in between, they're going through a 1 or 2 step process and to get that entitlement instead.
Yeah, but I guess my question is, if I'm a low density property owner going through a PUD process, where is it stated that I can have 1 per 3 acres or 1 per 10 acres? Like, is that stated somewhere?
It would be in the code.
Yeah. And what is
There's another column that would be here on this chart. And
that's more than 7 acres?
So
Because that might help, like if we could see that column, that, not right this minute, but that might help kind of explain low density, here's your proposed minimum lot size, here's what you can get through the PUD process, and then here's how much more you can get with these density bonuses.
Mhm.
And it needs to be substantial.
Yeah.
Dan, do you have it? It looks like you've got your hand up.
So the struggle I have with tier one is that you can get that through a PUD right now. But so all we're doing is we're allowing them to go through a 2-step process as opposed to going through a 5-step process, taking 3 years or something like that. So we're just giving them it. And they don't have to build anything additional on top of that. That's what I struggle with tier one, is that it's not like, oh, well, I go through a PUD and I have to build 3 units. Well, now you get those 3 units through a 2-step process. That's what I don't like about tier one, is like, there should be more deed restricted that's required in order to have a 2-step process.
Exactly.
That's where I struggle with tier one. I get what you're saying, Paul, and I think that there could be a tier one, but I think that you need to increase that deed restricted requirement from 1 in 3 to maybe 40% or 50% or something like that, to where it does require them to do more deed restricted than they would get through going through a PUD. Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying?
That's what I was trying to say, but you said it better.
Dan,
And aside from the hardline stance that I took earlier, that's exactly the compromise that I alluded to, is that you play with the number for, let's just score it, tier A or just tier 0, whatever. There's no tier 1, 2. Play with the number to get something that we can tolerate, that matters, that does something. And it's kind of meeting in the middle of the hard line and what we're seeing right now.
Lee?
The tier one column does require more than 33%.
A little.
I'm reading that right.
Yeah, I think that the proposal Dan made was to nudge that 37 up towards.
I think we should whack it. Raise it significantly, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, then we agree.
And that's exactly.
Then we agree on that.
60%
Or 50%, and then tier 2,
80.
80, 90.
Well, we get to Nick's observation at the beginning of our conversation, which is if you set the bar so high that it's impossible to make any money, then it won't happen.
I hear that, but I also remember in like February, you guys both saying, on the East End, it works. We're not talking West End, we're talking East End. And on the East End, it works to have 1 per 5 or 1 per 10 because people will just spend so much more money to be in Telluride. So now I'm hearing the opposite.
Town.
Okay. And this isn't close enough to town?
We may disagree, have different perspectives on this. I don't think we'll ever answer that question until somebody tries it. I mean, my opinion is that town works all day long, but in the county, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think at our last meeting, we had the maps out and we came to the conclusion that there aren't many parcels that fit this description anyway in the East End.
Yeah.
No, but they could be rezoned.
Yeah, you have to be rezoned, right?
This isn't gonna help, but you know. I just want to be clear. But what's so frustrating about this conversation, it's a good conversation, but what's frustrating is that when you're a market developer and you have total clarity, right? You get up every day, am I going to make money? And how much money am I going to make? It is absolutely. So if it's a 5-step public PUD process, they're going to factor that risk in, and that costs them money. And we're on the other side, we're trying to go, what is that threshold that still gets somebody to lean in? And we just don't have the facts. We don't know, where the market's going to change, because one starter castle on 17 acres could pay for 10 deed restricted units easily. Being facetious, but so I don't have an answer other than let's put something on the board, try it out, and if it doesn't work, the commissioners can step in and tweak it. But it's just it's too hard to game the market. What's really going to be the true underlying incentive? And I can tell you one disincentive is a 5-step public PUD process. That is very clear.
So one thing I wanted to throw in the mix here is, it seems like we're all agreeing that the East End seems to make a lot of sense, but there's not a lot of land available to us in the East End, very few parcels. So my question to this group, have we looked at the small tract act with the Forest Service? I was reading through that the other day, and there's some avenues for some small parcels that are close and close to the infrastructure that are in the county. So my question is, maybe commissioners or planning people, have we looked at the STA with the Forest Service? Because that seems to be if we can create a model that's close to town, I think we all agree that's where, we can accomplish something in the county that establishes housing that's close, that relies on our infrastructure that's here, and then the market up that allows us once again to not necessarily create more traffic, but create something that's closer. So have we looked at the STA as a possibility and a possible avenue for?
Okay.
Yes. When we did the East End Master Plan, we consulted with the Forest Service, and they identified 2 areas that had potential. One is the parcel below the Ilium water tanks, south of 2 Rivers. And the other one is the Matterhorn work area. So both of those are identified in the East End Master Plan as being eligible for I think the Ilium one is high density, and the Matterhorn area is medium density. That means both of them are eligible for the Community Housing Zone District or the Affordable Housing PUD. Medium density would be the residential medium zone would also be eligible for medium density, and the residential high would also be eligible for high density. So I think it's important to think about, we're looking at 3 zones, but remember there's 2 more zones that form a whole continuum. Low, medium, and high have evolved as, kind of the free market with some affordable housing in them. And then, affordable housing PUD is 100% affordable housing, but some mixed use could be in there, some commercial stuff. And then community housing comes in with just a little bit of free market in it. As we're looking at low, medium, and high, and hearing the conversation today, I'm almost thinking, but we have the community housing zone. We have, that could do this. So, think about the purpose of each zone and how they're, where they fit on the kind of the continuum of development.
So I guess my question is, for instance, the Ilium example, because I've studied the maps, that one seems to be closer in and less impact and more infrastructure available to it than out near Matterhorn and some others. Has any action been taken on that? Or if not, why? If we all agree that this makes sense closer in, then has action been taken? Is there a plan in that direction? Because it seems to me that that's seems to be something that would be worth exploring.
Areas but not village, right?
Yeah, it's in early stages.
Jared,
And Pete, to that point, we've talked with the Forest Service about every accessible piece of land that they are willing to talk about. And so we've expressed interest. We've kind of said, if something falls through with Mountain Village in their negotiations, we want to be second in line. So again, we explore any opportunity for federal land through the STA or through the administrative leasing procedure. And we know the federal government moves slowly and very deliberately, or not at all. So we are sitting and continuing those conversations.
and Pete, I would add that those end results are not free land grant style. It's still pay, yeah. And so the numbers don't work as easily as we'd like them to, but it's still worth pursuing. And Jared's exactly right. We are on.
Money through their housing tax,
Yep.
coming in, that seems to me for a long-term strategy to secure some of these things.
You're exactly right.
But probably you're gonna have to pay for it.
Yep.
I'm very familiar with those phrases, dealing with several. Now, it is an avenue that's worth exploring for the long haul, to benefit of the whole region.
You were right, and we agree. Yeah, it's happening. It's tediously slow.
Lance, could I ask for, again, you have the authority to do a straw poll. I certainly do not. But the comments that Jared and I kind of were making about you build one free market unit and you get a quarter of a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'll express my opinion. I've already have. That's not winning in my book. Not winning when you're trying to balance community character with housing. But a straw poll to see whether others feel like that's still moving forward and that's worth it. What that would do is shape the percentage that we choose in our tiers, because ultimately that's we're talking about a threshold for how much pain can we accept to make advances.
I think another way to pose that question, Nick, might be cleaner, which is to start offering different percentages for the tier one. Because what you asked is a very, well, would you be willing to stick with what we're seeing? And maybe we could start there. We could pose the question, would we like to keep tier one as is? And if not, then we start talking about different percentages. Should we start with that initial question? Are we content with tier one as presented? Hands up if you are. Not seeing any hands up in the room, not seeing any hands up on the Zoom. Now we'll go to what percentage number do we think is Paul's magic number that would incentivize a developer to go for a two-step process instead of a five-step PUD. And I've heard 40, which seems pretty close to 33 to me, and 50, which feels a little closer in my heart to a number that is a half step forward instead of a quarter step or a third step.
Yeah, at least for every free market you're building a deed restricted unit. So
you're saying 50?
50 is the floor for tier one access. Does anyone have any comments on that before we pull a straw poll and see if that has legs? I'm not hearing or seeing any comments on the Zoom. I'm hoping that John Pandolfo's cluing in and he's had some experience with this. Hi, John. Thumbs up. All right. Thank you. Well, let's pose that to the group. Could we adjust the percentage to 50% to get the tier one density bonus? Hands up if you care. Hands up high, please. I actually need to count. Pete is in. Nick is thinking. And I've got a thumbs up
for me. It
John.
depends what the tier two number is going to be, because they're related to each other.
We're at tier one now.
Yeah, but
Nick's saying they're related.
Vacuum.
Okay, well, we've got overwhelming support for tier one as is, but let's take Nick's second step and see if we can find an appropriate number for tier two as well, and satisfy not only everyone in the room, but also Nick for both.
Don't want special treatment.
You're a special guy. So tier 2, what is the magic number that allows a developer to salivate and act?
And
75?
I want to jump in. I seem to not know where my hand raising is, probably because I'm sharing screen and I can't see all of my things. When we were running the numbers, there was definitely kind of a break point in there, and I appreciate what you guys are saying. I think looking at tier 1 at 50% seems to make sense. But Robin, do you want to speak a little bit more to the numbers of when we went up to, like, when we were testing 80%, it kind of it was weird. It kind of tipped a different way. It might not be as enticing. So
Yeah, which this actually might change if that tier 1 starts at 50. Because at first we had tier 1 37 to 50%, and then tier 2 doesn't kick in until it's 80% or more. But then it turned out a developer would like make less money, even if they were building more units because they had to deed restrict more. So I would want to run those same numbers at 50 for the tier 1 and then whatever we decide for the tier 2. I think maybe a question for the group is, does that last tier, does it need to effectively create a meaningful opportunity for a developer to make money, make more money by restricting more units, or should that be more reserved for government partners, nonprofit partners, and it doesn't really matter if there's more opportunity to earn more revenue?
I would vote the latter for sure. I mean, the second tier is to help a developer who wants to develop affordable housing pay for their development. In other words, they're not a developer that's into it to take advantage of this increased density and still make a lot of money. The developer that takes advantage of tier 2 is committed to developing affordable housing.
I agree. And I think it has to be less than 100% because you have to make the numbers work.
You gotta get some free market in
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Right. I don't think in hearing Nick and believing Nick that we're going to make the numbers work. I think we're going to make them marginally better and still have to contribute as governments. And that's a part of the process that we haven't really got room for. But at some point in the PUD process, there is a lot of opportunity for horse trading, if you will, and discussion in a two-step process that's not baked in as cleanly or as obviously. And that may be a question that we need to consider, is knowing that we're going to have to step in as governments, whether it's the towns or the county, in order to make a tier 2 development juicy enough. When do we have that hard conversation and how do we do that?
I have a hard time fathoming that you couldn't build a 10,000 square foot house and 5,000 square foot houses and make the numbers work. I just, there's gotta be a breaking point. I'm not saying they're all the same size, but there's gotta be a way to build your starter castle and 5 cottages and make the numbers work. I don't know what that threshold is, but there's gotta be a way to do it here.
Paul, you're smiling like you've tried to do that math.
I don't know, let's not keep using that.
I love it. I love it. It's welcome to Telluride.
It's not gonna be friends.
But I don't want to balk at it just because we're not sure what the numbers are. As Paul keeps saying, we don't know how the numbers are going to play out in the future. We gotta land somewhere.
John Pandolfo's thrown out 2 numbers. The first was 75% for tier 2, and I believe the second was 67, which is a third. 2/3, yeah.
Nick, is there a number you like? Or is there just no number that you think will work?
It's not that there's no number that I think will work. I think that we have to concede to, somebody said it and said it eloquently, I think it was Robin, that we are talking about a tier for the governmental entities and PPPs. That's it. It's just acknowledge that that's what it's for.
Sure.
And with that, 100%. I mean, at that point, what's the token benefit of a subset of a deed restricted house that's going to help to perform by $1 million when you're doing an $80 million development. Just not.
The county still has to be
consequential.
able to afford it.
Yeah. But 100% I know is hardline. So what is the number? I mean, I'm seeing on the screen 75%. I heard Robin say 80% that they tinkered with. I mean, those seem reasonable.
Dan,
Paul, to Paul's point though, pick a number and run with it and see what happens. Yeah,
See what happens.
yeah, it's,
What suggest?
Danny Kraft.
100% agree. I just don't think it should be 100%. I mean, I think that the governments, let's say, or nonprofits or whatever, they are not gonna build as quickly because they aren't gonna have the funds, you know, so. Even if you get debt and you do that type of stuff, I just don't think it's gonna help. So I think anything we can do to reduce our debt as governments and everything, just to help a little, I think it would go a long distance. So that's why I don't think it should be 100%. Go ahead.
Yeah, and remember that we have the community housing zone, which allows up to 10% free market or up to 20% free market through a two-step process, 20% if it's net zero. And then once you go over that, 11%, 21%. So again, we have a zone district that meets the higher end of affordable, deed restricted. And then we've got affordable housing PUD, which is 100%. So what we're, need to work and focus on is what's below the community housing.
But this is also for low density. Community housing is not going to be low
Yeah.
density, right?
Yeah, low density could also be affordable housing PUD.
Well, the advantage of having another tier though, applied to the existing zone districts is that if you have to do a rezoning, then you've taken a two-step process and a four-step process.
Everyone's gonna have to rezone. We don't have any more land zoned for any of this.
Well, I would. I'm not a developer, but I would say 75% is easier to do the math with.
Or for consistency with what Kay just read, 80%. Just so it's the same number, but does that really matter? I guess maybe it doesn't matter.
I think that's right. I think we're operating in private partnership territory at the top end of that. But if county has the money and we're trying to develop a property, we probably would want to be able to cover our costs too. And be able to build something, whether it's at home, perhaps it's a community center or some other thing, to help pay the bills. So I would go to 100. So.
I hear that we're not going for the hard line. And I think that the range I'm hearing is somewhere in the 75 to 80.
And I just want to jump in. I just ran a couple numbers to Hallie's kind of say you have 6 units and one is the castle that you're building to build the 5 other units. That's 83%. If you had 10 total units and one of them was market rate, you'd be at 90%. That seems a little high based on what we're talking about. If it's, a smaller development like 5 units and one of them is market rate, you're at 80%. So I don't know. I was just kind of running that through my head to think about this conceptually, that it seems like we definitely like the idea of having at least kind of one market rate home to start to pay the way. And I do think that 75 to 80% seems to match with the numbers that we ran earlier, in kind of giving some revenue as well.
Nick, that 81 big home and 4 affordable homes actually does line up roughly with our impact employee generation numbers. And so instead of a quarter step forward, it would almost be a hold. 4 employees equals 1 starter castle in our rough numbers.
That's the number, is the four.
Give or take, it depends on square footage, but yeah,
It's a scale.
it's a scale, but that's kind of the middle high end of the scale.
in a big hand wave, it's a unit per 3,500 square foot house.
Yeah.
That's a massive hand wave. But
Yeah, but it's nice to have those line up.
80? Hands up for 80?
Not waiting out again.
Okay.
It might not, but at least we're trying.
You know, Pete, I keep going back to what Jared said, which is if we get a couple units out of this, we're doing better than if we didn't try at all. And
Got it.
that's the attitude I've been taking about housing for the last 7+ years is it's not working very well. We're not gonna ever win, but it would be foolish of me not to try. So
Tony threw a.
you and I can have a side conversation about all the time I've spent with Mountain Village Town Council members suggesting they raise up their impact.
I would also say, I think we are doing sort of what you're discussing, but in a backwards way. So Mountain Village is currently talking to the Forest Service. We're looking at how they could rezone their land. If they rezoned it, here's what they could build. I mean, we're trying to get there just in kind of a circular pattern.
Yours is much more direct. Yeah.
I love it.
Jared.
Robin,
Robin.
the hand raised. I bet she's-
Thanks. Yeah, I was just gonna mention, Jen, I also did a couple of, quick calculations at the 50 and 80, and it does look like that top tier would have a fighting chance for larger lots for a developer, that it would just make economic more sense to develop more units, even if you're restricting more. And just to contextualize a little bit, so say it was a 35-acre medium density lot, by right, you would be able to build one dwelling unit. And then if we follow these lot sizes with matching densities, if you went for the 50%, then you could build 11 units. 6 of them would be affordable or deed restricted. 5 would be market rate. And then if you went for the 80%, you could build 35 units, 1 per acre. 28% or 28 would be deed restricted and 7 would be market rate. So that is significant. And I think it could have some potential to work without significant public subsidy.
Lee.
And so just to make sure I've got the framework going here, that maximum example that you just gave would be assessed through a 2-step process. Okay. But I'm not the second step.
I think that one, it would depend on the housing type, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, it wouldn't be dependent on density. It would be dependent on, is it a multifamily versus, is it a duplex? That kind of thing.
And then you guys have already talked about minimum lot sizes, right? I came in late, but so then we've got the density bonus gives you 5-acre lots, but this is the minimum lot sizes. Okay, never mind.
This is the minimum lot sizes, but Hallie, to your point, I'm wondering if we could, I almost feel like I should put both of them. Oh my gosh, I can't talk this. I wonder if we should put this table and the density table both on one slide so we can see them together. Would that help everybody to talk through the next step, which is looking at the minimum lot sizes and the densities with these new tiered bonuses at 50% and 80%?
Sure. And I'm going to presume that might take you just a minute to do, so maybe we'll take a break. Come back at 10:30.
That sounds perfect. It'll only take me a couple minutes, but I think a break right now would be great for everyone.
All right. We are
Cool.
recessing till 10:30. Thanks, everybody.
Perfect. See the BOCC room lighting up. Are you guys back? If so,
We are back,
Like-
Jen, and we hear you loud and clear.
These
perfect.
properties, of which there are the most, able to throw a yurt on there and rent it seasonally to ski club.
Don't tell me about it.
Just do.
They're having a conversation about alternative living spaces like yurts and tiny homes, and just so you know, tiny homes, as long as they meet the state code, they can be a dwelling unit. We're fine with that. Yurts can't meet the energy code. RVs, they're a vehicle, and they also can't meet the energy code. So, we have in the community housing zone alternative living, to allow seasonal, assemblages like that, like Town Park does in the winter. But it's not a permanent long-term solution. And we've also beat ourselves up substantially at the Planning Commission level and the BOCC level on trying to amend the code relative to camping. So that is a totally different topic for a totally different day. Yeah, so that's where we're at on that.
Oh, okay. Same line of thinking though, is it Pete, to your point?
Yes.
There is a new fire code also that just is working its way through. I don't know if the board,
It's adopted.
It's adopted, it's happening.
And
Yeah.
that absolutely addresses fire risk, especially with these setbacks.
Yeah, the Wildfire Resiliency Code has been adopted. It is in effect. So anybody building now or doing a major alteration, major addition has to comply with the Wildfire Resiliency Code. And that talks about materials, all sorts of the vulnerabilities, decks, vents, landscaping, all of that is in there.
What do you guys define as major? Or additions?
I'd have to ask Matt for that, what that, how we're counting major. If it's a dollar valuation or what.
Jen, were you able to?
All right.
Sure, I see it. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, we have both the minimum lot size and the density stacked on top of each other now, so we can see a little bit better the correlation between the two. These were screenshots of something else, so please just know that those tiers are what we just talked about. So it would be tier 1 would be at a 50% and tier 2 would be at 80% for both of these. And I'm wondering if maybe in the next half hour-ish, we could try to get through the rest of this so we can get onto the uses, because I hear there's a lot of conversation about what uses are allowed where, and I think we'd want to try to allow a little bit of airtime for that. So I think the biggest question on the table might be, and you guys can tell me which way you want to look at this, but it seems like maybe we need to shift over to what density is allowed at each of these tiers, and then kind of work backwards into that minimum lot size. Right now, you'll see that the density and the minimum lot size are kind of a 1-to-1 between the low density and medium density. It's at the high density that does start to take a departure in the density tiers. So what all do you need from me? I ran some scenarios too at the 80% and 50%, and a lot of them are just round numbers and kind of easy to figure out. But at a 10-acre lot, let's say there's a 10-acre parcel in the high density that if we wanted to, if they're doing 80% deed restricted, based on these numbers, they could have a gross allowable density of 200 units. 160 of those would be deed restricted, 40 would be market rate. Now, just keeping into consideration that, a percentage of that site would be open space and roads and infrastructure, you probably really would be looking at more of a net density of 120 on a 10-acre lot, but just kind of throwing those numbers out there, you could perceivably work from that gross density, achieve 200 units, you'd have to cluster to really get those units based on those other factors. That was just me kind of running a quick scenario to throw out for folks to think about. I've got a couple of others if we need to run through them, but yeah, Holly.
I just want to jump in straight away and ask, is there a world in which we can limit how big your high density development can be? I know that's been Nick's question. And do we want 35 acres of high density? Maybe we do, but is there a way to even limit that if we wanted to?
No, it's gonna, again, going back to, the only high density zone we've ever had was Mountain Village, which is quite large.
But we have this map.
We do have some areas on there that potentially could be high density. They do tend to be smaller. I think the largest chunk, I want to say is about 20 acres, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
The largest undeveloped chunk.
So the largest undeveloped high density chunk is roughly 20 acres, which means roughly
400 units.
400 units. Okay.
So I agree personally. I mean, I think that you need to set a cap. And yes, the only difference is that you go through a PUD. So why wouldn't we have a cap? I mean, I don't know. To me, it's just, yes, it adds layers and stuff like that. The only one that's going to build 400 deed restricted units is probably the government. So why wouldn't we do those checks and balances?
So if there's zoned high density, can we still limit size? On the one hand, I can imagine saying like, no, they're zoned high density, they get the high density rights, but is there a world in which you can say high density, but up to X?
Yes,
Yes.
that world exists.
A world exists, okay.
Yes.
What does it look like? How do you paint that picture?
You throw a dart at the board and come up with a maximum cap number.
So even if I had 100 acres zoned high density, I wouldn't be allowed to build more than X units or
No,
X
that-
acres?
If you had 100 acres and the cap number was, say, 10 acres, you could build on your 100 acres, but you'd go through a PUD process, as Dan is saying.
Or by my rights here, I could do up to 10 acres developed. And the other the other 90 acres would be undeveloped?
I think you put those in holding corporations and you just develop in 10-acre chunks.
Fair.
You
Fair.
have to find someplace where there's enough water to do
Yeah.
it.
There's that.
There's almost a natural cap, which is water. And it's possible that we could come up with a cap number that we feel pretty good about, but there's also a natural cap that none of us happen to know, that we've all, at least the county's tried to calculate, and it turns out that's really hard to do. But I think we can all agree that there's not enough water to do maximum building on every available parcel.
Natural caps are good, but they're not
They're not certain.
they're not caps.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the world of engineering and technology and political will
Mhm.
sometimes can be staggering. So I think the check and balance that we're talking about is a good idea.
Well, let's throw out some numbers and see if we can come up with a comfortable cap.
What are some comparative properties? Like what does 20 acres even look like? How big's Lawson Hill? How big's, I don't know, something. How big's Sunnyside?
Society Turn is 20 acres,
Society Turn, but that's not developed yet.
but it's approved for development.
Right. But I can't.
Yeah, but you
visualize
can
it.
kind of picture that land area,
Land
if
area.
that helps.
That's 20
It's
acres.
20 acres. Sunnyside is 2.5, 2.7? Question mark? Jared's gonna look it up. And I should know Lawson, and I'm sorry, I don't have that number off the top of my head.
It's big though, right? It's quite a bit
Yeah.
bigger than 20 acres, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we're not talking as big as Lawson Hill. We're talking a fraction of Lawson Hill is our biggest high density possible lot.
I think a good example is Pathfinder, and I think that's one that we should, it's a little weird to reverse engineer code
Yeah.
based on a property, but it's a good tangible, property. It's 57 acres. A lot of it is unbuildable. So what's your buildable acreage on that? That could be a spirited debate between people, but it's a lot less than 57. But you can start with that. Currently zoned forestry ag, would need to be rezoned to something here or CH to develop. What's the threshold for a cap on that property?
Any idea what just a rough percentage of buildable, the problem?
Sorry, this will digress. It's a complicated property because of a penstock that's on there, which is a high pressure water line that runs from Ames through there. So it bisects the perfectly buildable part of that property, which sucks. But if again, when I analyzed it, there was somewhere between 5 and 9 like quality buildable lots of acreage, which is not a lot. But it can be more. It can be more than that. Again, I was stubborn about what I considered buildable.
I just am going back to give the facts on Sunnyside. That's 4 acres total, 30 units, so that is 7.5 units per acre. So that's kind of one idea that you can think of, and then I can do.
And again, Sunnyside is not all buildable. There's property up above Sunnyside that is steep ass hillside.
So the developed density might be more than what you're saying. We might be looking at more like the 10 per acre kind of density there.
Yeah.
Of the actual built acreage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Nick is exactly right about Sunnyside, and this I don't think is talking out of school. We have been developing really rough sketches of how to site some houses on that parcel, and we've steered away from the penstock. We have avoided the steep hillsides that are going to slough and slide and be a problem. And I think Jared backed me up, 50 to 70, depending on how many duplexes and how you do the driveways. And that's about 70 is pretty much max. If we were to get the Forest Service parcel at some distant time in the future, it could add another maybe 20.
So you're saying 70 units on those 5 to 9 acres that are probably buildable. So
Yeah.
that's again roughly the 10 DU per acre.
What about just saying a cap at 100?
Just to throw out a number.
I mean, because honestly, if we're doing a development more than 100 units. Personally, I'd like it to go through the UD. That's just me.
Yeah,
Okay.
that makes total sense.
Good start.
Even lower.
Yeah.
But it's, we could go lower, but. I don't know, what we're talking 70 and that, we add another 20 maybe, we're still under that 100. I don't know, it's a start.
So 100 units is Telluride Lodge. That's like 110 doors, I think. With a heck of a lot of open space, but that's kind of a ballpark. It's probably more of a medium density layout because of all the open space. But that gives you an idea of how many 100 units looks like. Some of them are, yeah. Yeah.
Lawson Hill is 210 units.
Okay.
Okay, can you remember what's the acreage on Lawson Hill?
I don't remember it offhand.
Okay.
If I recall though, the density comes into, and not counting all the open space down in the gorge. Upper Lawson, and that 210 is Upper Lawson. Upper Lawson comes into, I want to say somewhere around 11 units per acre. Because we did all this analysis when we were doing community housing. So I just can't quite remember all of the numbers.
But that 11 units per acre accounts for the open space in the roads, right?
I think I wasn't counting it because it was hard to count. I was going off of the acreage in the matrix, which didn't list that.
Okay.
It feels more dense than that, but.
Well, it feels like 11 units per acre, but the development density is actually less because of the open space.
AMI says 157.
Then Los
Los-
Angeles Hunts was, yeah.
Yeah. And we have the matrix in the table. I just don't have, yeah.
So the discussion on the table is about a cap on a
Num-
specific,
on number of units, anything over 100
has to go through.
has to go through PUD.
So right now, 20 units per acre. Basically up to 5 acres. Would be your highest density without a PUD, and that'd be two-step.
I think that's not as high as you should go with a two-step process.
I'm gonna throw a complete mind blower in this, and Hallie and Lee are privy to this.
Wrench me.
No, you did this. The cap of 100, okay, it's a nice arbitrary start. But where that property is in relation to the master plan, and specifically the future land use category of the area where that property resides, is relevant. So I would propose, and I know this is just an adding a complicating layer, but that there be at least 2 categories, so that if this property that's now zoned high density resides in the residential medium future land use category, it have a cap of its own. And if it resides in the future land use category residential high, that's where the 100 lives. Yeah, this way, when you have those adjacency issues where a property is next to something or in an area that's contemplated by the master plan to be medium, you're not slapping the 100 next to it, because that's gonna really piss people off.
So to say that differently,
Please do.
have another column that is maximum, I guess, acres, or I'm not sure which number we're using here, but have a column for each of those zone districts to have their own max. So high density max would be 100, I guess we're going DUs. But medium would have a different max.
I don't know that it's another, how it manifests in the actual land use code change, it's probably just text. It's just text under
Well,
the.
I mean, could be.
But in this table, it would be under the 20 DU per acre. It would just be in parentheses underneath there, max of 100, and if residential high, future land use category, max X if it's residential medium, future land use category. Again, it's just for presentation purposes, that be. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, don't be sorry, Nick. That's actually a really smart suggestion from someone who's encountered that concern. And to have existing guardrails up in the process early on is going to save a lot of consternation later. And it doesn't mean that we won't end up somewhere different, but it means that we'll have more time to talk it through.
Although, in some ways, that starts to create a disincentive. Because if people are running up against the max cap on the units, then they're going to be inclined to create, not go above that unit. So we might not be seeing, them going into, deeply into the tier 2.
Because the 2-step process is so desirable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think we're also looking at litigation by mixing the neighborhoods. I think that's what Nick's talking about. So yes, what we say is true. But what Nick is also saying is true is that aren't we trying to create a pathway that's the most effective way to create housing without at the same time not just blowing things up, so to speak. So I do agree with you. At the same time, you don't want to falsely incentivize somebody from the outside, knowing that there's this big wave that's cooperative and set out for mutual success. So I think that's what I'd like to see. There's something to balance a realistic expectation versus putting some number out there that some out-of-town developer may not fully understand the landscape. Stay cooperative.
Okay, I see your point. That's a good point about the disincentive in tier 2. So the solution is to do the same caps in tier one. Not the same number, but the same notion of caps in tier one. So now you have 4 distinguishing caps through those. Then at least it's equal treatment, equal disincentivization, which cancels itself out.
So for high density tier one, I could have 10 units per acre. Half of them are deed restricted, but I can only build 100. Tier two, I can build 20 DUs per acre. Half of them are deed restricted, and I can build 200 or what? Because now we're going really dense and bigger.
Again, the numbers, I think we were talking about Danny's suggestion of 100 at the
At
tier
the high
2.
end. So then drop
So
it
then
to
drop
50.
it down to something lower in tier 1. Again, thereby creating somewhat of an incentive to go tier 2 and build more housing.
So then I can do 10 DUs per acre. We'll say we'll say you can do 50 just for easy math. So tier one, I can do 50 DUs. That lets me develop 5 acres of my 35 acre parcel at high density. I mean, I may as well just go low density. I mean, I guess it lets me cluster, which has been something that we've heard here, is that I get to cluster my high density. But we're basically leaving a heck of a lot of that high density zoned land vacant if we put these kind of caps.
Well, we're not saying no to higher density, we're saying longer process.
We're saying PUD.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing from the room is that that is a valuable exercise and time well spent, and that without that longer process, that there will be a lot of pushback, which is normal and will happen whether it's 2 or 5, but with 5, there's a better chance that we'll find a more agreeable end result.
Especially if it's a less than ideal property.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, having the extra steps for engineering review and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's coming from a man on the inside who's looked at a lot of engineering studies and tried to come up with something rational. Paul's laughing.
I guess my concern is just looking at the high density lots. They're not really butting up against other neighborhoods. I guess Two Rivers is down there, but it's not, are they contiguous? I can't tell.
You know, when you live within spitting distance of proposed new development, it's your neighborhood.
But that's what I'm saying. Does anyone live within spitting distance of these high density proposed future use lots?
Two Rivers.
Yeah.
Two Rivers does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And aren't they already high density?
They are.
And that discussion's already kind of started with the Mountain Village and Two Rivers and the county feeling tension on both sides. So that one is actually in play. Whatever system we create today, it's not going to change the process.
Well, but it limits how much Mountain Village can develop without going through a PUD.
Well, keep in mind, they've got the CH zone already.
Yeah, right. But that's only the lower lot, not the one right next to Two Rivers.
True.
But again, keep in mind the residential high mixed use land use category, they can choose medium density, high density, community housing or affordable housing PUD. So, any developer's going to, look at what their goal is and which zone district suits them the best. And so, yeah, likely if, somebody is developing, specifically wants to develop affordable housing, they're probably going to go community housing on that.
I guess my only hesitation is we just had this whole conversation about how use by right for high density needs to be incentivized in and of itself, so we don't just get a house on high density land. And so I guess I'm a little nervous if these caps are too stringent that we're going to cut the legs right out from under that whole conversation. But 50 acre, 50 units or 100 units is still very different than one house on 35 acres. So but that's the tension I'm feeling. It's just, are we just taking the legs right out from the whole conversation we just
I
had?
think Kay and you were saying the same thing. And I don't think we're gonna know the answer until we do what Paul's been proposing, which is throw out a number and try it. And we can err a little bit on an uncomfortably high cap in hopes that we don't cut any legs off, or we can be more worried about quality of life and existing residents and make it a little lower. Lee.
In the course of working on the East End Master Plan and the Community Housing District, one of the sore points from the public standpoint was the lack of caps.
Yes.
So from the standpoint of process and trying to get this through and done and accepted, I'm in favor of adding a cap to the middle tier, as has been suggested. I don't know what the number is.
Uncertainty public will dark. In that range and
Right.
well beyond anything brown.
Right.
Okay, we seem to have arrived at 100 for the cap for high density. And
Tier 2.
tier 2, thank you. And we're now trying to zero in on a cap for tier 1. And we can just ask Dan to throw another good number out.
Oh, good. I really don't know. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, we're looking at medium distance.
Mhm.
Oh, you mean for tier 1?
Correct.
Across the board.
Can you,
too.
can you take a pass and?
Yeah.
Tier 1, the difference between the two is tier 1 is 50% deed restricted and tier 2 is 80.
Or 80%.
Right.
But then we're also looking at that second table, so we're also looking at higher density. So tier 1 gets you 10 units per acre, tier 2 gets you 20 units per acre. So depending on the different cap, you can build more land area to get the same number of units, or an apartment complex with 20 units per acre, but maybe on a smaller footprint.
And for the second part, the density chart we're looking at, the tier 1 and tier 2 carries down. Correct? Tier 1 density is gonna be 50 and tier 2 is gonna be 80.
Jen, you're nodding.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you guys can see, I reshared my screen with a little tiny Excel spreadsheet at the bottom that kind of clarifies where we're at on the densities. So we have our tier 1 at 50% down here, tier 2 at 80%, and then I've just added a little column for max number of units, which is that cap we're talking about. So as we're talking about these, if we start to hone in on numbers, I'll kind of plug them in there and we can all see them and see if we like them or not.
Proportional, so if you're looking at 10 units per acre on the other G, we have a cap max, the equivalent formula for low density.
I mean,
So do that math for us, Pete.
Yeah,
And Pete, I can hardly hear you. I think you might need to move closer to the mic.
no, I was just saying, looking at medium density, do we do it as a similar ratio as we did on the other? So what will we have? 1 unit per 3. So do we cut it proportionally? So what is that, 33? So 33 max? See what I'm saying? We'll create a proportional dynamic
Right.
with our math.
Jen, could you throw into your spreadsheet just to check the numbers? And unfortunately, the computer battery died, so I can't look at the future land use map. But in the residential, in the, tier 2, where there's 20 dwelling units per acre, if we were to do a max of 100 units for properties that are in the residential high future land use category, and 50 units for the residential medium future land use category, and then flip to tier 1, where it's 10 dwelling units per acre, 40 units for residential high future land use category, and 20 So that's basically a half split.
I don't
For-
understand the difference there.
The difference
The
there,
zoning that you're talking
yeah,
about.
this is where I just really feel pretty passionately that we can't ignore our master plan
Mhm.
when we're talking about caps on units.
But nothing is zoned high density right now. It would only be future high density zoning.
Everything we're talking about is purely academic.
Right.
Because there needs to be a rezone that
Right.
happens. And that's
So-
true. The only property that doesn't fit that equation right now is the CH zone property that Mountain Village owns. But
Mhm.
everything else that's potentially out there of size will need to be rezoned. That sucks, but that's part of it.
But you're not
Problem.
gonna have a high density future residential medium, right? You're gonna have future medium density, so that 50 would go up a line
Yeah, 50 goes up.
and the 25 goes up a line.
I can't.
So.
Can you make that table a lot bigger, please?
Yeah,
So yeah, high density is the residential high zone, or the residential high land use is implemented by high density CH affordable housing PUD. The medium density is implemented by the medium density zone and then CH and affordable housing PUD. So you're not going to have the high density zone in a residential medium future land use classification.
Right.
You could hypothetically have a medium density zone in a residential high land use classification
Because you can zone down.
if somebody wanted to underzone. But you're not going to have you're not going to have high density in the residential medium land use classification.
So there's no comma there. It's just a 100. Right?
Right.
Is that right, Nick?
That's where I don't have the future land use map because my computer's dead.
I can project.
Not the
it
map,
if
but
you
the
need it.
categories. It'd be the table 8 of the East End Master Plan. That
Yeah,
defines, yeah.
yeah.
Kay's got it memorized.
Well, I've got it up on this. I can share screen if
yeah, do you want to share screen for a second? We can all look at that for
okay.
context.
While you're bringing that up, what Nick's numbers just did to the high density basically limit both scenarios to 5 acres at their maximum density. So we're basically
Without going
saying-
through a PUD.
Yeah.
So
So we're saying you can
Yeah.
develop 5 acres at your maximum tier 1 or tier 2 density without going PUD.
yeah.
I think that would excuse me, I think that would also incentivize the clustering that we've been saying we'd like to see if we're gonna have high density development.
So is 5 acres the number we like? 5 acres of high density, like apartment style, 20 units per acre feels like I don't want to go any bigger than that.
So the areas with residential high mixed use land use that don't already have zoning or entitlements is this Forest Service piece here. And the part that's on the west side of the road really isn't developable because that's river. And then the Alexander parcel going down, this is the wastewater parcel here. But there is still this in here that has potential. This is already zoned community housing. And then there's a small 11-acre parcel here at the Ophir Loop that has maybe some potential. This lot here, piece over here actually has a lot of encumbrances on it. But he's got 11 acres over here that could have something. And then I think that's it for the residential high that isn't zoned or developed already. Zoned with entitlements. Because, for example, you've got over here the Mill Creek property, but that's already got their PUD on it and they're not interested in changing it.
And that's
And,
low.
uh,
density residential.
It's low density residential as opposed to low density. It's its own thing. So that's what it is. And then in terms of residential medium that isn't already entitled and developed, you've got the church camp and the Cordillera property here. And then you've got the Pathfinder property. This is San Bernardo here, and then this is the Matterhorn property. So that's kind of it.
50 for medium.
Okay, would you be willing to put table 8 up, just so we can,
You're not gonna wanna have more than.
From the consultant's report, table 8.
no, not the consult, the East End Master
East End
Plan.
Master-
Yeah,
I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. I'll have to go find it.
damn, anybody got a
I
chance?
have the Easton Master Plan up now. I'm trying to find table 8.
This help you?
Where's the table?
6, 7. Table 8. There we go. I'll reshare
Thank you, Jen.
screen. Hold on. I think I'm sharing all of us. Let's try that screen. Okay. I'll make this bigger. Just bear with me for a second.
While she's pulling that up, what are you trying to see here?
The table gives very clear direction on what zone districts are deemed applicable, appropriate for a future land use category.
Mhm.
So that would shape the caps if we're doing the sub tiers of the caps. To see, so I think seeing it, this is where it'll make sense, just maybe reading it.
Yeah.
So maybe let's start with the residential high. And
Yeah.
Jen, any chance you can blow that up? There's some old eyes in this room.
I can go.
But yeah, this is what I've been saying. If somebody has land that it has a land use of residential high, then they can choose high density
Mhm.
community housing, affordable housing PUD, the mixed use development, which we haven't really talked about. And mobile home falls into that, but that's not a zone district that we rezone to anymore. So yeah, we didn't put residential medium in under there. I mean, certainly somebody could, zone to high density and choose to, not to maximize their density. Weirdly enough, it happens. And then under the residential medium, you have the medium density, the low density residential, which is a specialized district. We're not touching that one. That's Mill Creek and Deep Creek. Affordable housing PUD and community housing.
I don't understand how that
Okay.
relates to the numbers we're trying to come up
Okay,
with, though.
let me try to do this. Jen, if you can scroll down to the high, let's just focus on it for a second. Look at the land use adjacencies. Generally appropriate to be adjacent to, and here are the land use categories that a property that is high can be adjacent to. So this is where the consternation comes in, and is that if there's an adjacent property to a property that gets rezoned to HD, the high density one that we're talking about now, and it's adjacent to a property that is residential low or residential medium in the land use, that's going to cause some friction.
Yes.
And that's where the caps come in.
So you want a separate cap depending on whether it's adjacent to low or whether it's
Yes.
adjacent to medium.
Yes.
And when
Oh.
we did the adjacencies, I mean, if you go back and you look at the map, it's the reality of our development pattern. We have so much stuff of different densities that's next to, other things of different densities. So that was why we mentioned the adjacencies. But the other tool, when you're coming to doing clustering, is it can allow you to move your development away from sensitive areas. So the mere fact that something's near to residential low is not in and of itself disqualifying, yeah.
And I don't see that we have that really happening, do we?
Yeah, it really, actually, once you get down to it, when you start looking at the unzoned, stuff that hasn't been rezoned yet, doesn't have entitlements on it, most of those are surrounded by the F zone.
Yeah, it's F zone or it's already high density, like Two Rivers, I
Yeah.
appreciate their concern, but they are already zoned high district, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they don't, like, that's not something that Nick is trying to address in his table anyway, because they're already high density. So we don't have high density going in adjacent to low density on our proposed future zoning map.
Yeah.
We just don't.
Yet.
No, but I'm looking at the map. We don't have that proposed. Like the proposed future lots that could be zoned high density are not adjacent to low density lots.
Let's use Pathfinder as an example again. Pathfinder is
Zone
Zone.
potential,
forest ag,
yes,
would need to be rezoned to,
medium.
well, to whatever is applicable in the residential medium future land use map as a potential zone district. And if I'm not mistaken, that would allow for I don't know, but it needs to be rezoned. Adjacent to Pathfinder are residential low future land use map properties
Where?
everywhere. San Bernardino, well,
San Bernardo's not low.
It's all F, right?
Which-
So
which one?
you're considering F residential.
no, I'm considering whatever's green in there.
That's
or
Forest Service.
sorry, what? No, you're right. That's even worse. That's conservation.
So what you're seeing in that area, the darker green is Forest Service land. The lighter green are essentially mining claims.
That goes straight up a mountainside.
Well, not all of them, but
Those ones
a
in San
lot.
Bernardo do.
The ones to the west don't. Not entirely.
Those are designated within this as conservation and large.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
which I'd put in the worse than residential low, that's lower density.
Okay, but knowing the Pathfinder lot, they are across a ravine and up Sunshine Mountain. They are not like sharing a walkable space.
Regardless,
Mhm.
adjacent property, I mean, I'm just not seeing the risk to putting a cap if we agree that there needs to be some kind of guardrail to protect. Is that person gonna care who owns mine? I don't know. I mean, and that, we're just using one example. There's gotta be other examples in here that. And just in my gut, it tells me it's a bad practice to allow something with unbridled, when we're talking 20 units per acre, 10 units per acre, which are so much greater than any other, just doesn't feel right.
But we're
For the
putting
what
caps
if.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and-
yeah, so we're just deciding what.
But
yeah.
I would suggest we don't make multiple caps on the same tiers on the same zone because it gets extremely complicated for one. And there's no science behind what we're doing here. We're using a gut feel for this.
I thought there was-
Danny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah. Keep in mind that the residential high at the higher end of it can get into dwelling units per acre. Residential medium is acres per dwelling unit. So it's a very different density. And then the other thing is to, keep in mind that our principal task that we set out with was removing barriers to the creation of affordable housing. Are we putting barriers back in place?
I think we're removing barriers within reason.
Okay.
And I'd add a second half to our principal task, okay, which is equally important, which is maintaining the sense of landscape and other important community values. So yes, we're supposed to remove barriers for housing, but not at the expense of quality of life entirely. And we all admit there'll be a balance there and it's going to be imperfect. But I'm not adverse to the concept of caps. I do think that Haley's idea of Hallie's idea, not making it overly complicated, is worth considering. Nick, I think that your concerns about 2 mining claims, that's just one example, are relatively easy as a decision maker to accept and overcome. If there were a number of spots on the map that were low density and potential high density, and I could see a lot of those potential conflicts, I think I'd be more concerned about having the tiered caps that you propose. But given the lay of the land and the small number of potential times this is actually going to come into play at a large scale, I think we can streamline to just one set of caps. Lee.
I'd also support that one of our missions is not only a cleaner process, but a clearer process. And I think caps are appropriate because it sets the boundaries for both the developer and it channels the public reaction somewhat so that we don't churn for multiple meetings on, well, this could be a 300 unit piece and it's not going to be, but it could be. And that's where the resistance comes in and puts in the lane. Yeah.
I wonder if there isn't a number that's like, no matter where it fits on this chart or what it is or what it's adjacent to, is there a number of units that people are uncomfortable allowing a developer to build without going through a 5-step PUD process? And maybe we're like making this too complicated. Maybe there's a number that's just like, 100 units, that needs to go through, a more detailed process so that the neighbors can weigh in and the guy that owns the, mining claim and everybody gets a chance to weigh in. So maybe that's one number that we feel the community would be comfortable with, and that's our cap. Doesn't mean you can't build more than that number. It just means not quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that way about low density even, like more than 100 units at 1 per 7 acres even is a huge development.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And, keeping in mind, actually, if you could put the Excel spreadsheet up again, but, if somebody's going for max density, in high density, they're going to hit that 100 units at 5 acres of land. Whereas if they're on the in a medium density zone, so
Jen, can you bring up that spreadsheet?
Yeah, I'm getting there again.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm not driving very well. There we go.
I think it was just Excel.
it was the
Yeah.
Excel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Your little mathematical exercise.
Yeah.
I was just going to show you guys this really quick, though. You're headed in exactly the right direction with this, with the uses. We have several uses already that we're talking about. A certain number of units are allowed in a 2-step process, and then beyond that, it would be the 5-step or the PUD. But let me get this back up. There's your spreadsheet.
Yeah, so, say for example, so medium density, they're at tier 2, 1 unit per acre. They're going to be developing 50 acres before they get to the max number of units. So that's just something to keep in mind, 20 dwelling units per acre. At 100 units, you hit that at 5 acres, 1 dwelling unit per acre. You're going to hit that at 50 acres.
Jared.
I was just gonna say, and for sake of argument, we have that potential to go medium density on Pathfinder. right? That Pathfinder lot is 54 acres. And so we would be looking at that kind of density level at that location.
But clustered.
Yeah, that would absolutely have to be close enough. So, because there's not that much buildable land. And again, I think the other things, thinking through that process. Water, right? We do not currently have a water source that would support it. Sewer, we have to get state permitting to even get that started, right? So thinking about this and just thinking as a real example, you know, I think it fits in some ways that these 50 units would be kind of almost a limit. We would try and push that, right? Because we want more, and that would be a government project. We'd be trying to figure out any way to maximize as any developer would.
And
Right.
for the medium density, or for the residential medium future land use, CH still remains an option.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Jared, I would say that given our tables, Pathfinder absolutely does not work because we have a maximum density of 1 unit per acre and a minimum lot size of 1 acre. So you can build 9 on Pathfinder.
Yeah, and again,
If you
that's likely going to push us if we proof out water, if we proof out a sewer opportunity, we'll be looking and saying the thing that makes sense is CH.
Yeah.
And again, that'll be 100% affordable and a government project.
And CH currently has a max of 20. Right?
With no caps.
No.
No caps, but on a lot that we know is not massive.
It's constrained.
And for the
That
medium
return
density tier 1 at a max of 25, you'd have to have a 75 acre lot. So I'm kind of wondering about this number, if that's necessary, or if it is necessary, if we need to drop it down or leave it as is, because it would have to take a large parcel to meet that cap.
I mean, what's ski ranches? That's medium density, isn't it? How big is that?
Yeah, they're 2 to 3.
But I mean, how many total acres is that? Is that
200
more than,
lots. Yeah, 200 lots.
that's 600 acres.
Less than that, some not.
So we would want that to go PUD, is what we're saying.
Yeah, and then also Ski Ranches has open space.
Yeah, correct.
So I guess what she's saying is, what is the threshold here for saying it doesn't have to go PUD? Is that 75 acres? How big a ski ranch would you allow without a PUD?
I think Pete is to check on which lots.
These are good enough.
25 and 50, 50 and a.
Yeah, he's-
But no, but that's the assignment is, what is the number?
Any practical anything. Not gonna get your bird.
I'm happy with these numbers. But I'm trying to frame it, because I think everyone's kind of like, oh, number soup.
I think that if we go all the way back to where Nick started us and accept that any high density deed restricted development is going to be government organized, that's probably going to be CH. And that the possibility of using the medium density zoning is going to be smaller parcels and somewhat philanthropic anyways, even though we're trying to set incentives. The reality is that it's going to be easier to build one fancy house than it is to go through a 4-step process to change your zoning and then take advantage of these incentives. People might do it. The market could shift, who knows, but low percentage.
I apologize, I have to leave, but I do have one question. The use by right numbers that don't have any deed restricted housing attached to them, did those still make it through, or are we getting rid of those?
We basically need to keep the use by right.
The two, I mean, going
Yeah.
from 1 and 35 to 2 acres for high density. I
Yeah,
thought
I thought we punted that column.
Yeah, I thought we all discussed that we weren't gonna do that, that we were gonna leave it at 35. And then
So
same.
35, yeah, on high density, I kind of feel like that's where we left off last time, where we were saying we were leaning towards leaving it at 35, but then we were throwing out the caveat that do you want those parcels that we've identified from the East End master plan to develop at that density potentially? And we said, let's kind of take a look at it again today. So maybe we need to do 2 straw polls. And I don't know, Lane, if we could do this really quick before you leave, but one is, do we want to just keep the proposed density in high density also at 1 per 35, which I'm totally fine with. I can see the logic in that. So could we do that straw poll really quick and then maybe do another straw poll on the other numbers we just came up with?
Yes, let's do that. We'll take the first
Perfect.
question that you posed, Jen, which is maintaining the use by right on high density at 1 per 35. Hands up, please. All right, and I've got a thumbs up from John, I believe. Thank you, John. From Tony, great. That straw poll
Awesome.
passes.
Yay. Then the second one would be a straw poll on this new Excel spreadsheet. With the 2 tiers, the 50% and the 80%, the different new density requirements per tier and the max, the caps on each of those.
We're going to call this the Dan Kraft spreadsheet.
It's very.
It is very well. All those in
Very,
favor
very well.
of the Kraft?
Well, we haven't changed
Spreadsheet.
anything. We just added the
Yes,
caps, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
As presented. Great. I'm seeing thumbs up from John Pandolfo and Tony. We have reached unanimity as a group. Well done. Now we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and then the other thing, I think we already did a straw poll, but want to reaffirm that we're going to increase the tier 1 base to 50% and the tier 2 to 80%.
Correct.
That is correct.
That is correct.
And then we're happy with those acreages, is that right? The 7 acres, the 5 acres at those tiers for low density, and have we talked about that, or are we just going with it?
I think they make sense.
I think we're going with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Did we? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, actually, one thing that I would put out there is that, those are the densities that work, but the minimum lot size, I would recommend,
Thanks, Elaine.
Can you show just your
yeah,
slide?
we're hiding the minimum lot size right now.
Yeah, go ahead and minimize your Excel spreadsheet.
And from what you
I'm gonna
said.
take that over here. There we go.
Yeah, okay, there we go. So the minimum lot size needs to be less than your density because you need to fit in roads and things like that. So so the minimum lot sizes, and also you want to encourage clustering.
That's the
So
question.
yeah. If you're encouraging clustering and you want to accommodate infrastructure, I actually support going down to 1 acre minimums. And you can fit well, you're going to be on some sort of water system.
Which zone?
Low, medium, low and medium. Go to, well, at least for tier 1, well, for low density, tier 1, tier 2. Go to 1 acre. And then medium density, tier 1, but maybe for medium density, we go to a 1/2 acre minimum lot size. And just for, a lot of the lots down in Fall Creek in that area are 1/2 acre or smaller. Just for, trying to visualize it, but, having your minimum lot size the same as your density is going to cause problems. People are never going to achieve their max density. That's what I'm trying to say.
Because you have to account for a road.
Yeah, roads and infrastructure and, stuff.
Unbuildable portions of a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess the first question is, do we want to allow clustering on low density, or do we want low density to be forced to stay low density?
So, examples of our low density zone districts, and we've got some that, they are clustered and then the lots just, the houses are close together, but the lots, give the appearance of open space. Because they, are bigger. We don't have that much future land use low density out there either. Most of that's down in Ilium Valley. And then, Diamond Ridge, Diamond Ranch.
I mean, I kind of love it because it encourages the idea of open space. So even if you're low density, like I'm thinking if anyone's driven up on Wilson Mesa, our houses are in a ring on East Anderson Loop and West Anderson Loop. And then we have this giant open space in the middle to which our property abuts. So it feels like you have this massive amount of open space, even though you're on, 8-acre lots. So that's not the same as clustering, but if we were to cluster houses in a low density zone, then the rest of the acreage is open space. And so it feels really open.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So is there a reason not to do that?
I don't think so.
What are you proposing though, as far as language? I mean,
What's she saying?
So, yeah, they just put so we've got up here, minimum lot size, suggesting a 1 acre minimum lot size, for low density and medium density and a 3,000 square foot lot size for high density.
And I'm showing it in two different columns in case we want to think about it in the two different tiers, but I think it's just an across the board. I don't think we have tiers associated with that.
Yeah.
And the only other caveat I would throw in is in low density, I think is the only place you'll probably really see this, maybe in medium, but if you wanted homes on well and septic, we may need to state that those would have to be at maybe 2 acres or something.
Yeah. Yeah, 1 acre, you can usually fit well and septic and still get your separation.
Okay, perfect. Then I think we can go one.
Isn't that just gonna shake out though? Do we even have to say that?
Well, no, because I mean, that is one criteria in the land use code is what is a minimum lot size? And, we could, we have some zones like community housing where there is no minimum, it's just whatever fits. And quite frankly, high density, once you get into the high density, is also kind of irrelevant. At town of Telluride, minimum 2,500 square foot lot size, not taking in, and not taking into account roads or anything, that's 17 units per acre. So at 3,000 square feet, that's either gonna require duplexes or, I mean, it's not gonna work for single family. You're not gonna get to 20 dwelling units per acre if those 3,000 square foot lots are all single family. As they say, the math ain't mathing.
I see. So for high density, it has to be smaller in order to build an apartment complex.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, high density, I'd almost encourage you to not even put a minimum lot size in there. It's gonna be what the development is.
But we've put a cap, so it can't go bigger
Right,
than
you got a cap on the number of units. But, it's going to allow a lot of flexibility in the types of units that are developed, whether they're single family, detached, single family attached, townhome, duplex, or multifamily.
I might agree with Kay in the high density. I think you could drop that minimum lot size out and say there is no minimum. You might get a mix of uses. You might get a few single family with some higher density, but I think you're either going to get single family type uses, whether they're detached and attached, or multifamily uses.
Do have in code minimum dwelling unit size.
Right?
Our
200
minimum, no, our minimum dwelling unit
Max.
size is 400.
I feel like flexibility is valid and I think that clustering is beneficial. And if these proposed changes give us those things, then I'd entertain them. I'd support them.
So 1 acre on low density and medium density and none on high density.
Do you want to do a straw poll?
Sure.
Very quiet over here.
Yeah.
It just seems odd that low and medium are the same to me. Is that you know, that the idea of clustering, again, all in favor, that's sound planning. But the idea that you basically one size fits all with low density and medium density isn't
I mean,
really resonating with me.
It's because you're,
Yeah.
well, but it's because then you still have your 1 DU per 3 acres, 1 DU per 7 acres, so that's how you're spreading out the density.
Yeah, no, I understand it. This is processing.
In your head.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could go 2 and 1. I think 2 would still work on low density.
Just slightly larger lots.
Mhm.
That would probably help preserve what you're next to.
Mhm.
Okay, so
So could you have a duplex on a low density lot?
Would you ever?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, most of that's gonna be single family plus an ADU.
I mean, that's actually where my comments were focused. We're not there yet. That's like the next table that we haven't gotten to, but why wouldn't you let a duplex exist in the world? Anywhere a single family house could go, couldn't you put up a duplex? It's one building. Is any of this like them?
Yeah, low density is expected based on our draft. Is expected to be single family and ADUs. We don't have duplexes and multifamily in that zone.
Right, that's a comment I was going to.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked the question now.
Yeah, and again, you know, when you're dealing with large lot, I just, you know, the larger lots and the lower density, that's typically where you want to keep your single family. Rather than having multifamily and, if you want to encourage multifamily and duplexes and things like that, you want to have small lots and high density. Just kind of, you know, the reality of the math.
Maybe, I mean. We don't have to go into that now, but that was the question that I had.
That's a good question, Hallie. And I don't want to throw a monkey wrench in here because we're making such good progress, but the medium density, our tier 2 does allow 1 DU per acre. And our minimum lot size is 1 acre. So those are matching up right now. If we want those to cluster, we may need to throw in, I'm thinking like half-acre lots if they're clustered and on public water and sewer. And I don't know if that's worth throwing in at this moment, or if we want to leave the minimum lot size on MD at 1 acre.
say that again, Pete? Pete's suggesting we leave it alone.
Leave it alone? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in support of that. My brain was just pulling a Nick. I'm thinking through all these scenarios. Processing it all.
So it seems like we could take a straw poll on the Excel spreadsheet bottom half of our screen with the numbers as they stand currently. And if we were to achieve that, then we'd have just a few minutes, say 15, for the final part of the conversation that Jen was hoping to get to. So let's take a straw poll on the Excel spreadsheet on the bottom half of the screen. Hands are going up.
Great.
All right, Tony's in favor as well. Thank you, Tony.
Hey, Lance.
Awesome. That was a great conversation.
Nick, go
not-
ahead.
Not going backwards, but it's a comment that Lee, you made earlier about the consternation on the CH zone not having caps. This is interesting because it creates a dynamic. When would anybody ever choose the HD zone district over the CH zone district when the CH zone doesn't have that cap? I mean, there are reasons I could see from a process standpoint from more of the subordinate criteria, but I guess what I would propose is if we're doing this for consistency, to have a similar cap on the CH zone where you're 20 dwelling units per acre, do the same cap on it. This way they're on an even playing field as far as density. And I know that's digging up the past. But now that we've got it here, it seems like the appropriate thing to do.
So without the cap, CH zone does or does not have to go PUD right now?
Does not.
Does not. Two-step.
With the cap, they would have to go PUD.
If they go beyond the
If they go
cap.
beyond.
Correct. Yeah, what is that cap? Here we are again.
Yeah, and
Makes me want a higher cap.
I think you know, Amy Ward is on for Mountain Village. Amy, I don't know if you want to chime in on how that would impact your plans for the Ilium property right now.
I don't think that it would come into effect. They've already been granted CH zoning as it stands.
Well, they have the CH zoning, but if we amend the zone district development standards and they haven't submitted a complete development permit, then they have to follow the land use code in effect at the time of their application. Right now, if they were to submit it, and they're not there yet, it would be the current
Understood.
code. But if we change the code, what does that have? What effect does that have?
We probably need to be a little careful legislating around a specific development, right?
That's true.
So maybe we don't want her to answer that question.
So, I mean, I can jump in just to say that, you know, I didn't think CH zoning was on the table today, but I'm glad I'm here at the meeting. I know that in some changes to zoning, you can grandfather previously zoned parcels, so that I think, you know, just at a bare minimum, that would be our request.
Yeah.
But until I know what the caps you're talking about are, I don't have a.
Right now, Amy, you guys are looking into, is it about 130 units on 2 lots? Am I misremembering?
I don't think it was that, I don't think it was quite that dense. I want to say it was closer to 90, but I don't have the drawings in front of me.
Okay. So,
Let me look.
and you know, just so you know, we are working on a separate code amendment, which would allow the creation through minor subdivisions of up to 4 lots. And I think from an interpretation standpoint, we'd be going per lot.
So we have the cap, we have the density, and that cap is implemented per lot. So you could have 2 lots with each 100 units. Yes?
Probably.
I mean, is there a different way to interpret it? How else would you interpret it?
I think that's how you'd have to interpret it because, those lots could be under different ownerships and all of that. So you'd have to look at each lot as an individual development.
So are they going to submit 2 development applications?
Yeah, right now, the idea is that we subdivide into the lots and then we would have 2 concurrent applications, 1 for each lot.
Lee,
Nick, to your point, I think.
But either way, we're not even close to that density cap. We're at like 30 on one parcel and maybe 50 something on the other.
I think that when we get into the nuts and bolts of changes to the CHCDs, that, a cap should be part of that consideration. And we've now got a model to work from. I don't think we can throw it into the spreadsheet today.
Are we actually doing that? I mean, I felt like we were getting toward wrapping up the SSR, and there are amendments proposed to the CH zone right now in our packet, but we've never discussed it.
That is a really good question, Nick, and I think the answer is yes. I would like to keep this group rolling and continue to take on some of those outstanding projects, based on time and a desire to have some things to present to the planning commission and the commissioners this fall. I think that this group, if we're willing, is going to keep meeting. And I'm seeing heads nodding, which indicates willingness. Good, thank you. I appreciate all of you nodding your heads there. With that, let's put the CH conversation in the future, but know that we are establishing some precedent for discussing caps within it. And take our straw poll on the Excel spreadsheet. Did we do that? I think we did. And then
We did
yeah,
that.
we accomplished that. Jen, we've got just a few. Oh, Nick's got his hand
I'm
up.
sorry, one more housekeeping item.
Go.
I just want to make sure that something doesn't slip through the cracks, is that in the current amendments to HD, LD, and MD, the bulk uses has, in all three of them, says by right. And last week, we established that was not correct. I just want to make sure that that makes it to the planning commission for a work session with that correction.
Yes, we'll fix that.
Okay.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Yes, yep.
We've got just a few minutes to get to the final topic for today. Is it worth broaching with 10 minutes to go?
Well, I was wondering, for those of you who did in-depth review, and thank you so much for doing that, were there any items in table 7 that really you were really struggling with, or that you really couldn't wrap your arms around, that you really think we need to discuss? Or in general, were these changes headed in the right direction? And we do have some unit caps here. We'll roll in, actually, we'll just roll in a full unit cap per zone district for these new caps we talked about today. But was there anything that really needs group discussion in this area? Or do you think the comments you guys have made in Conveo will be helpful to us?
This is where I wanted to ask the question. If we're trying to increase dwelling units, then to my mind, anywhere that we allow a single household dwelling, we could consider allowing a duplex because it's one building, it's one owner, it's 2 dwelling units. I'm not talking a townhome, I'm not talking apartments, I'm talking a duplex. Thoughts on that?
Duplex is a single owner.
A single owner duplex.
You're proposing that neither of them are deed restricted.
I don't know.
They could conceptually be free market.
Yeah, they would just be anywhere you put a single family dwelling. So anywhere, basically there's like a section in here where we defined all these different housing units. And then this table 6 talks about which zone allows which type of house. And so by right, you could say single household dwelling, comma, duplex.
So essentially you're saying instead of an accessory dwelling unit, you're just saying one can't put a.
Yeah, because to someone on the street, it still looks like a house.
Okay, so we're on table 7, and that does have one step duplex dwelling.
I can't find table 7.
It's on page 21 of the report.
But table 6 is after it then?
Doesn't a duplex, word duplex imply separate ownership?
I don't think it does the way we defined it in here.
Yes, table 7 does come before table 6. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, there is something strange because this shows table 8, which is actually still part of tables. No, never mind.
So somewhere in here,
We'll
we
fix that numbering
found-
thing, Callie.
Duplex defined as single ownership.
I mean, if they build duplexes, most likely they'd want to do a, duplex condos aren't really a thing, but there is a duplex split.
The way they were defined in here, we've defined townhomes as single household attached dwellings with separate ownership and duplexes as being different, I think, if I've read that right.
You want a townhome, one of.
No, I want a duplex with one owner.
So a townhome generally owns the land under them.
Hmm.
So they own, the building and the land. Whereas a duplex, there's ways to split the ownership of the unit, but then the land under them is a common element owned by both of them.
Like a condominium.
Like a condo.
It's like, yeah, baby condominium's a good term.
But a duplex, at least the way I've seen it written in here, does not have to have its own ownership structure. So you're allowing two dwelling units in one single building. That's how I read this.
Yeah,
Right.
Holly, I think that is how we've written this. And to Kay's point, you can separate the ownership of each of those units by condominiumizing them, or they can be, one of them can be owned, one could be rented, but they are two units on one parcel, basically. Two attached units on one parcel.
Is there an appetite for that? And a low density or medium density zone?
I would wonder if maybe that's most likely gonna happen for an institution like the school district has done in Lawson Hill. They've got several duplexes.
Yeah.
There's certainly an appetite of people having a basement lock off, which is half a step away from a duplex.
Yeah, and
So,
keep in mind, those zone districts already allow the accessory dwelling unit. And we're proposing increasing the size of the ADU, I think whether deed restricted or not, to 1,000 square feet. So that's where your second unit comes in, but we did write in here that if you wanted to do a duplex, you still can't exceed the 12,000 square foot gross, or total floor area, so we don't end up with a 24,000 square foot glorified, beyond starter castle,
East and
duplex.
West Street.
mhm. Totally agree. I mean,
I think the advantage of a duplex might be in construction costs, where you don't have to create two separate structures to achieve the same density that you'd be given otherwise. Am I right?
Yeah, and you can already attach your ADU to your primary. It doesn't have to be a separate structure.
Yeah, I'm not sure why wouldn't the definition as is satisfy Holly's desire?
because we've called out
Of an ADU.
duplexes separately
Yeah.
in here in different ways.
Right, that's the definition of the actual structure, but the definition of the ADU sort of implies that it's okay if it's attached or detached. Just can't be huge.
Right, or you could build a 4,000 square foot house and split it down the middle and call it a duplex, but it couldn't be an ADU because an ADU is limited to 1,000 square feet.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So is there, just to be clear, if we make sure that our definitions allow duplexes and don't necessarily overlap, they keep our limits, is anybody objectionable to that? To Hallie's point, we may need to double check our definitions to make sure it fits, but.
well, it'll get really screwy with all of our tables that allow one dwelling unit per. So that is the question. Is a duplex one dwelling unit or two?
Two.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because then it throws a wrench into every single one of our tables. Unless you specifically call out duplexes as being for the purposes of our land use code, a single family house.
And I guess I'm saying I hate to say it, well, the market, because I've been, people have been proved wrong on that before. But it turns out, the market was what it was because nobody was offering the alternative. But we haven't been getting questions from people in the low density situation saying, gosh, I really want to build a duplex. They want more ADUs. They want bigger ADUs. But nobody's come in and asked us if they could build a duplex.
But I could rattle off a number of people who have a lock-off basement, which is effectively a duplex.
Yeah, we know.
So
And a significant number of them are in violation of the code for a number of reasons.
Dan,
So my own concern with that is, we're adding another free market. We're exacerbating the whole issue that we're talking about throughout this. I personally, yes, if you limit that, limit the size of it, maybe potentially they might run into some local or someone like that. But if you don't limit the size, allow someone to build a 3,000 square foot free market with attached to another duplex that's 3,000 square feet. I think you're exacerbating the issue that we're talking about. So personally, I think unless you limit that size of that additional duplex unit, that it's still gonna exacerbate it, but hopefully they would run into some.
Or do you go so far as to deed restrict it? That's the stick that would probably not have any
I
built.
don't think you can deed restrict half a house if it's not.
It would be a
split
deed
ownership.
restriction on the house. Oh, yeah, it would follow the property, but it would be that, yeah, you
It's
can,
deed restricting an ADU.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But no one's gonna build their single family house and deed restrict it electively. Like that's.
Well, the
That's
deed
not-
restriction would apply to a specific
property.
part of it.
Yeah.
And we have deed restrictions
that.
like that.
I mean, I think Dan,
That'd be the solution.
I think Danny's, I mean, of course, I support what Danny's saying. It's been a kind of recurring theme, but I mean, it could easily see where duplexes get out of control if they're not protected like that, where they become, and I know there's a short-term rental policy that would protect that, but they certainly would be for those one season families that come here, enroll their kids in school, and all of a sudden, people are making money off of those instead of housing a local.
Well, that's one way to look at it. The other way is exactly the opposite, which is you have these people who have their big house and they don't want to rent it out because they want to be able to come anytime. But then they have this lock off or this whatever that they can rent out. And so they can have their cake and eat it too.
That's the ADU.
With that's the idea with the deed restriction.
But it costs a lot more to build. Because
not
it's separate.
not necessarily.
Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing is that we should check our definitions for ADUs and duplexes and steer those definitions so that the scenario that Dan outlined is not possible, but the scenario that you outlined of housing locals long-term is. And I believe that our consultant team can make that adjustment with case help.
Cool.
I think we've outlined the problem and we aren't gonna have time to craft the language. Jen, is that possible for you to take care of for us?
100%.
Thank you.
Look at that. All right, I know we're out of time, but I guess if anyone wants to put any other major issues or questions that they have in the Conveo document, we can do a similar exercise and kind of look through.
All right, that time frame is tight because we are meeting jointly on Wednesday at 9:30. Not 9 o'clock, 9:30. And we want to take these recommendations to the planning commission and commissioners for continued discussion.
Yeah.
So if anybody does have concerns, why don't you get those to Jen by sundown today?
Do you want to set our next meeting date?
It's a good question. Let's hold on that until we've had this joint meeting. See if we get good response or etc. But instead of trying to synchronize calendars right now, people are talking up with some relying on doodle poll. Thank you for that. It's willingness to continue.
Thank you all for the great conversation today. I think this was really helpful, and Kay and company will we'll send you that little table that I was showing that you can share on Wednesday, and we'll quickly summarize the decisions that we made today so you can present those.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your
Bye.
day.
Thank you. You too. All my pleasure.